My name is Nathan Aaberg, and I am very happy to welcome you to the webinar series, Do More with Your Farmland. This is the first session. If you could mute your feed, your screen, that would be awesome. Just hit that little microphone button. Um, we are about to begin. I want to say, first of all, I'm Nathan Aaberg, Illinois FarmLink Director with the Illinois FarmLink program of the Land Connection. The Land Connection is a nonprofit based in Champaign with staff around the state. And we work to create as much as we can a better food and farming system for eaters, for community members, for businesses, and for farmers. And we do that in a variety of different ways. We do farmer training and lots of education. So we have an organic grain conference every year. We offer webinars, field days. We coordinate the Idea Farm Network, which is a great listserv that allows farmers and landowners and other people to share knowledge. We also try to make food accessible to everybody. We have a farmers market program in Champaign-Urbana. And we also offer food access systems where people who don't necessarily have a lot of money can still access good, healthy food. And then our program, Illinois FarmLink, is our land access program. We believe that you can't have a good farming system and food system if farmers can't find affordable land. And our Illinois FarmLink program serves the whole state. We have navigators in each of the three regions, and we advise, we empower through resources and educations, and we connect. We actually have a profile system. It's kind of like a dating system, but it's not a dating system where a farmer or a landowner can create a profile that other people can search for and find a good match. And I want to say one more quick note about our advising. If you're a landowner on this call and you would like to talk about your situation and get advice about your land and finding a farmer or whatever the case might be, please reach out to us, illinoisfarmlink.org, and we would be happy to talk through with you what your situation is multiple times if necessary. Our goal for the series is to help you learn some new useful things for the stewardship of your land. We actually want you to get so excited that you're going to want to learn more. This webinar series can't cover everything that needs to be covered. We'll hope that you'll just be like, man, I just need to learn more. This is so interesting. And we also hope that it generates in your heart and mind the idea, I can do this. I can make my land reflect my values. Today, we're going to have me presenting a little bit of a roadmap, just kind of an overview of all the things that are part of kind of making your farmland do right by your values. We're going to have a landowner farmer story with Harry Drucker and Nathan Keister, which I think you're going to find interesting and educational. And then we have our friends from the Land Stewardship Project who are going to share some insights and exercises for you about kind of clarifying and articulating what your values and goals are around your farmland. And then we'll also have some polling at the end. I just want to sort of remind people, if you haven't used Zoom much before, if you look in the bottom left corner of your screen, you're going to see this microphone. We'd love it if everyone could click on it so there's the red line through it so that we don't pick up any of your background noise and conversation so everyone can hear super well. You may also want to sort of click on the camera, at least while we're presenting, to kind of share, save bandwidth so we don't get any choppy or like getting stuck with our video feed. And then if you have questions, you see this chat button. If you hit the chat button and open that up, you can put in a comment that everyone will see. And we'd love for you to test it right now and just share, if you're a landowner, how much land do you have and where the land is. I think that would be interesting for people to know the diversity of places where people's farmland is. And then while I'm doing introductions and while you're putting that information in the chat, Jeannie, do you mind introducing yourself as well?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Jeannie Jansen. I work with Nathan at Illinois FarmLink, and I come to this work as a beginning farmer, livestock and dairy farmer. But for right now, I live in Chicago and am taking a break from farming to take care of my grandparents. So, super excited to be here on this webinar today and be with all of you.
Great. Thanks, Jeannie. So just as a note, we are recording the webinar. and we'll eventually make a YouTube of it. Again, if you don't want to necessarily be seen, just click that camera and have that red diagonal line go through it, and you'll be all taken care of there. Um, and if you have, again, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat button, and please be obviously courteous and compassionate to fellow attendees. We just did introductions. I wanted to start before I talk about the roadmap. I just wanted to share a little bit about why we're doing this series. As I mentioned, we work with farmers and landowners around farmland issues quite a bit. And we've just seen that a lot of farmland owners are really hungry for more information about how to take care of and steward their land. This is a picture from a 2023 landowners conference in Eastern Peoria that was hosted by Extension, and they had 200 slots, 200 available seats, and they sold out. There are so many farmland owners who want to better understand the practicalities and conservation of their land that they came from all over to sort of have this opportunity to learn. And that was a signal to us that there's a need out there that isn't being addressed by many other service outlets. And in our own work, we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of landowners who are in different places in their journey in terms of changing the direction of their farmland stewardship so that it feels good for them in terms of their legacy, their family values, the health of the land, long-term productivity, all those things. And these are all people like you who have jobs, have lots of things going on in their lives, but they're really eager to sort of engage and figure out what to do with their land. And we wanted to sort of help people like that. One of the things we learned from talking to all these landowners is that there's some different obstacles for landowners who might be going from the idea of, boy, I'd love to maybe have less inputs on my land, or I'd like to have the soil be more resilient in times of drought or flooding. There's some obstacles like lack of knowledge. Maybe you're not confident in talking to a farmer. Maybe there's just time, like you're busy with lots of things. Maybe you don't have the support. Maybe you don't even have consensus in your family. And those obstacles can be a little challenging. But I also want to share that we've never known more about soil biology and the ecology of plants and soil life, and how it's possible to have your farm be really alive above the ground and below the ground, and yet also be efficiently productive so you don't need as many inputs to produce good harvests and make some money. And sort of the leading voice, the leading sort of work of this understanding is the world of regenerative agriculture. Gabe Brown, a row crop farmer from North Dakota, is one of the leaders in that movement. He had, I think, 3 or 4 crop harvests that got completely blown up by hail and other storms. And so by the next season, he had to figure out, because he had no money and the banks didn't want to lend him money, he had to figure out how to grow crops without inputs. And he found that building soil biology and taking care of land as if it was a natural system really saved him, saved his family, and allowed him to feel really good about his farming. And it also was great for his own spirit in terms of the approach to farming that he took. He found out that he could promote life, grow life, and yet also have a productive harvest. So if you're going to write down a note, I would say Google Gabe Brown or YouTube Gabe Brown and learn a lot more from him. I also want to say there's never been more farmers, I think this is true, especially young farmers looking to farm in conservation-friendly, community-supporting ways. There's like a lot of farmers, and they find the process of finding land that they can afford and do this kind of farming is actually very hard for them. We talk to a lot of people, and their stories are pretty poignant. And so if you're looking to go in a slightly different direction that's more soil friendly or ecologically friendly or whatever, there are farmers out there looking to potentially partner with you. The other thing I just want to say is, in many cases, the relationship between a landowner and a tenant can be kind of business-like. But it is possible that if you know your values and you find a farmer who has the same values, that you can have a pretty rewarding relationship that's more than business. Here's a landowner on the right, Jackie Davis. She connected with Will Glazik, a row crop farmer in Illinois, and they've just developed a really good friendship. And they share decision making on the farm, and it's enriched both of their lives, both in terms of the land and in terms of that relationship. And also, we just want to make sure one of the things we've also found is that there's a lot of landowners who, when they start thinking about their land, and sometimes they're surrounded by a lot of people who are just thinking about the monetary value of their land. Sometimes those farmland owning families can feel alone. Like, are we weird for doing this? And you're not weird, and you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there who are like you, like this family on the right, the Bachers. They're looking to buy some farmland so they can rent it to some farmers, and they talked to this farmer on the left for 2 hours. The organic farmer gave up 2 hours of his life just to kind of give them some insight and ideas because he wanted to be helpful. And there are other landowners, there are nonprofits, there are farmers, there's lots of people who are out there ready to help you. So what I wanted to talk to you about until we talk to our farmer and landowner story is just this roadmap. We came up with this roadmap as a way to sort of like make this whole journey ball of knot of ideas and tasks and responsibilities, try to make it easier for you to kind of just concentrate on each segment and see how everything fits together. So we have 5 steps that we've broken it out to. One is preparing, there's planning, find the right farmer, creating a good arrangement with that farmer, and then keeping that relationship going in a positive way and evolving that relationship. So our components of this webinar series are going to touch on these different segments. So today I'm just going to do more of a rough overview, but you'll be getting a deeper dive into some of these over the next 4 webinars. So we start with preparation. Really trying to engage with your landowner, with your land can take some time. So it's good to prepare like you would for a long journey or a sailing boat ride or something. It's good to begin in with a little bit of preparation. One of the things that we really encourage people to do, and you're going to hear more about this from our friends at the Land Stewardship Project, is like the people part of it. Like oftentimes people who are interested in farmland want to jump into the farmland part of it in terms of soils and that kind of thing. But we really encourage you to start with the people dimension of this in terms of, first of all, what are your goals and values? Sometimes it really helps to write those out and to really know those, because those can help you when you are making decisions with family members or with farmers. Are you on the same page with your decision makers? What would it take to get on the same page? We've seen a number of situations where there might be, for example, 5 siblings, and 4 of them might be like, I'm happy to get the part of the rent check. Happy that's farmland, but I'm not going to think about it very much. And it can just take one sibling speaking up and saying, you know what, I think I'd like us to think a little bit more about the erosion issue or different things. And oftentimes the rest of the family will go along with you. It's also important to think about the practicalities you have in your life. How much time do you have to kind of devote to taking care of the farmland and thinking about it and studying it? Do you need that revenue really badly, or do you have some flexibility? Do you have money that you could potentially invest, like in the infrastructure or fencing? How close are you? Is there someone, if you're not close, is there someone nearby who could help you? Who owns it? Other siblings perhaps. Knowing all that can help you find a solution that doesn't stress you out and still helps you make progress. And of course, we really encourage people to think about succession. There's a very small number of farmland owning families who often have a succession plan in terms of who's going to own the land in the future. If you can have some plans for that as part of your overall plan for your land, that can help you figure out what kind of time frame you have. Is it 50 years or is it 5? That can be really helpful. And finally, how involved do you want to be with the farming? Some people are just like, as long as the right thing is being done, I'm okay with it. Other people like to know what exactly is being planted and what cover crop species are being used. Just knowing that can be super helpful to you. And then also there's a big question of how much do you know about farming? There are different kinds of farming, and those, if you know one, it doesn't mean you know much about the other. And here's the other question: how much do you want to know? Like, if you're really super fascinated, and we know landowners who are really interested, that's one direction. If you're not that interested, then that's another direction. You may need to rely on someone else to take care of the details. So you got the people, you're thinking about how much you want to know about farming. The other part is the land, and we're going to have a presentation next week about trying to understand exactly what are the characteristics of your piece of land. So, for example, soil type, soil productivity, is the layout easy for the farmer? All those kinds of things. All these affect what you offer and what's possible with your land, and that's super important to know. And we have resources for you to sort of help figure that out. So next part is planning. I'm not going to say too much about planning. We're going to have also a speaker talking about planning, but I think the thing I'd like you to know is that your plan should not just be what happens on the land. It should include your values and goals. It should include the land and what's happening around your land in terms of erosion, the watershed, habitat, all those kinds of things, what kind of resources you have. And also, this is a big one, if you have really big, ambitious plans for your land, but you can't find the farmer who can implement those plans, that can be an issue. And so sometimes what is possible and practical for your land, that may rely on finding the right partner and what they can do. And sometimes if you have a young farmer or an adaptable, curious farmer, what they can do when you first start working with them until later on,
No,
that can change.
turned off.
And also, we just want to share a few quick planning tips. The biggest one I would say is it will take time. Don't put the pressure on yourself of like solving and getting a plan like in 3 months. Like it can take a lot of time, and just be patient with that. Definitely recommend having a system for storing data information. Might be journals, might be file folders, might be your computer, might be spreadsheets, whatever it is. Definitely leave room for farmer input. I would suggest having kind of a rough plan, but then when you have a farmer who fits your values, have them think about what's practical and what makes sense for them. Definitely tap lots of people who know different things, but also expect sometimes you'll talk to someone who's a specialist in, like, let's say, for example, water quality or hydrology, and their advice and ideas might conflict with someone else's, another subject matter's advice. So expect that, and then have some good, wise advisors who can help you figure that out. And then we're going to go to finding a right farmer. That's something we're going to present about in the fourth presentation. I have some few general tips, but first I want to say something about farmers. We work a lot with farmers, and sometimes landowners who haven't been involved in farming themselves may not have necessarily like a realistic idea of what a farmer's life is like and what's possible for them. Just want to remind you, it's a challenging profession. It's hard to make a living at it. There's a big food and farming system in terms of our subsidies and big companies that control markets, all that kind of thing that make it very hard. It's also important to remember that a lot of farmers who invested a lot of time and energy and money in the current system of farming they have. And so sometimes changing can be a little bit hard. There's just a lot of things. I just encourage you to have a lot of compassion and sympathy for farmers in general. And don't automatically assume that your current tenant isn't the right person for your dreams. Sometimes there are tenants who are willing to change because they've actually been waiting for maybe you to sort of say something, or they've been afraid of saying something about ideas they have because you might not be interested, and you might even stop the lease. So don't automatically assume that they're not interested. And there's some factors to consider. Again, we can give you some advice and ideas about that. Just want to encourage you to look for people who are open-minded and curious. Someone who's interested in learning more, who's adaptable, who doesn't just say, this is the way I've always done it. That can be, finding someone like that can be super helpful. And someone who kind of like communicates openly, some has some of the common values with you can be a big plus. So once you find what seems to be the right farmer, then we get into usually a lease. And we're going to have a speaker talking about lease negotiations. The biggest piece of advice I would say is when you're negotiating the lease, and you should definitely negotiate the lease, um, um, that's a great opportunity to get a further read on whether that farmer is a good fit for you. If they negotiate fairly and they're open and they kind of are willing to compromise where necessary, that's a very good sign for what kind of a relationship you would have in the years to come. Um, Take your time. You don't have to do it all in one meeting. We actually encourage you to do it in the morning if you can, the negotiations, because you're fresh and that's just the best time to make big decisions. And then when you can, remember, farming is a risky business. So if you can share risk with the farmer, like by sharing profits and expenses, for example, or having a flex lease, or for example, maybe you being the person to buy some infrastructure, put it in, that can really help the farmer feel like, okay, this relationship is more than just a business transaction. It's something more than that. And finally, your job is you're not done when you've got that lease going and the farmer starts farming. It's super important to continue to communicate, to see whether your values and goals are actually happening on the land, and to adapt. You're going to hear a story today from farmer Nathan and a landowner Harry about how their relationship has evolved, and that's just really, really normal. We have some communication and relationship tips. Sometimes you should just have a direct conversation and say, how do you want to communicate? Do you want to do text? Do you want to do a monthly meeting? Like, how do you want to do that? And everyone's different. You're different. The farmer's different. So if you can just kind of agree on that, that can be super helpful. So finally, some last tips. Give yourself time to learn and plan and learn and replan. Like the land is going to respond and interact with your farming in ways you may not even understand or expect. And that's normal. And so give yourself time and the farmer time to sort of like live and learn and adapt as things go forward. And I really like this diagram. This is the emotional journey of creating anything great. And you start on the left. This is when you're starting a new project or a new idea, and you feel like this is the best idea ever. Then you start diving in it, and it still feels fun. And then you say, this is harder than I thought. And then you say, this is going to be a lot of work. And then you say, this sucks. I have no idea where this is going. And there's some swear signs down at the bottom. Then things start coming back around. And eventually you end up way at the top where it feels like this is one of the things I am most proud of. So you should not be surprised if some things don't work out as easily as you expect from the beginning. But if you persist, and if you have that bridge, I'm not sure if you can see this bridge, it's called belief, persistence, family, humor, and I would say also community. If you can have advisors and people and other people who can stick with you, you can get past that swamp of despair. And remember, this is something I heard from one of our land stewardship projects that she tells her landowners all the time. It's your land. So sometimes, even if you get a little bit of resistance from community members or anybody else, just remember it's your land, and we all have a limited time to live in this world, and it's managing your land in a way that you feel proud of can be really a powerful experience. And with that, I am going to see if I can stop sharing, and would love to see if there's any questions about that. I kind of ran through things pretty fast. Was that helpful? Can I get a thumbs up from anybody? Was that helpful at all? All right, I have one. Thank you. That's great. Any questions? Jeannie, do you mind reading out any questions if there are any?
Yeah, and feel free to put those in the chat or just come off mute, if whichever is best and easiest.
I'll just ask one question to prompt any questions you might have. Like, what's been the biggest, if you're on this call, what's been your biggest obstacle to thinking about your land or learning more about it or making a decision or finding a farmer? Like, has there been anything that's been especially challenging? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Getting other shareholders along, that is such a common issue. You should not feel alone in that one. That's really true. Sometimes it takes a lot of time just to kind of work things out without um, breaking up that relationship. That's really hard. Any other thoughts or feedback? If not, I think we can move into the next presentation. Nathan, do you want to share your screen? And I think we have Harry on the line as well, don't we?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. Great.
Okay. I got good cell
Thanks.
reception. I don't know how long it'll last, but I'm here.
Okay. So while Nathan is sharing the screen, I just want to share a little bit about them. Um, I live in the Galena area, and I've met both Nathan and Harry because they both live and work in the Galena area in Jo Daviess County. Nathan is a farmer. He's also the president of the Jo Daviess County Farm Bureau. I've really enjoyed learning a lot about farming from him. And he has two young children as well, so he's really rooted here. Harry, I don't think I can share your full biography because you've done so much and you've done so many interesting things, but he's involved with the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission. He's been a really big contributor to the Nature Conservancy, and he's been super helpful in a lot of other ways, just very generous with his time as well. Nathan, do you feel like you're good to go?
Am I sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
Okay. All right. I had asked permission and then it said I was, but then I wasn't seeing it on my end. So I didn't want to talk about something that I thought was there and it wasn't. But no, I have 2 minutes to be able to say good morning, everybody, before we turn to afternoon. But no, Nathan had asked me to and Harry to, chat a little bit. We've been able to form collaboration with each other now. It'll be five years in July, and really look forward to kind of just talking about the evolution, what we're doing, and all that's involved with that, and really hope to have lots of good questions, and ones I haven't thought of. So with that, I'll kind of get started. But Harry, if you want to, if I can advance slides, there we go. If you'd like to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'll go, and then we'll talk a little bit about the farm.
Sure. Thanks, Nathan. And I hope everybody can hear me all right. I'm in deep southern Illinois with the Nature Conservancy on a conservation site that we're working on. So I'm glad I've got reception. So a little bit about me. I'm basically a kid who grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but in the early 60s, my folks bought a farm out in northwestern Illinois and then an adjacent farm and an adjacent farm. And it grew into a real business, a cow-calf operation with feedlots. And I'd spend, weekends and summers out there. So I can partially claim that I grew up somewhat on a farm. But other than that, I'm not trying to pretend to be I'm anybody who I'm not. But about 30 years ago, my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to buy an adjacent farm. And that farm was already leased out to a neighboring farmer, and we continued to do that, although we did ask them to not use chemicals on a field that was right next to our house that they were growing corn and beans on. But they continued to farm the rest of the tillable ground we had in a conventional way. But I knew that I always wanted to move more into a more sustainable form of land use, as I understood it at least. And you got to take a big humility pill in all of this stuff because everybody's situation, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, everybody's situation is different. But I wanted our farm. This is not a hobby for us. It's not a gentleman farm. I want it to be economically viable and self-sustaining. As I mentioned, I'm involved in conservation, and agriculture is a huge solution to our water and climate problems. It's also a huge contributor I should say, huge contributor to the solutions. It's also a huge contributor to the problems. And so I felt, I had a duty to manage our land in a way that I felt was the best way, and to try and walk the walk as much as talk the talk. So that's sort of the journey we're on, starting 8 years ago. we started transitioning to organic. The farmer that I was running our farm to was flexible enough. They weren't going to change because they had leased a bunch of other land and they weren't going to change to organic, but they agreed the fields that they were leasing from us, we would just put them into, hay and forage so that we could get through a 3-year transition period and they could still use that for hay. And then we would take over those fields and not lease them to them anymore and try our hand at organic farming. So I had a little bit of a runway to find somebody like Nathan. So Nathan, off to you.
Yes. So a little bit about me. So I grew up Scales Mountain, Illinois, which has the highest point of elevation in the state. That's the one cool fact about our town of 400 people. And it's right at the border. Grew up 5 miles south of the Wisconsin border, 13 miles from Iowa, and grew up on a dairy farm where we transitioned to organic starting in 2002. So that type of farming is something that has just been deeply ingrained in me when it comes to land stewardship and how to farm, and it's something that I'll always be thankful I got to do as a kid growing up, and even though it's a lot of work, and farm with my wife Cody, who's also a family and consumer science teacher at the local high school and middle school. And then we've got 2 kids, Kate, who just turned 3 in April, and then Cooper, who turned 1 here in May. And this kind of transitions right into the next one of kind of, how did Harry and I get connected? We don't have a long-standing prior to, renting the place. It's not that we knew each other for a long period of time. It was kind of just a serendipitous thing that occurred, and that's thanks to our introduction at a field day that my dad hosted in the summer of 2020. So obviously 2020 was an interesting year for everyone, but my dad decided to host a field day, and it was a very, very warm day. And we had about a dozen people show up, and I knew everybody that was there except for Harry. And I was like, I gotta go say hi to this guy. And we kind of struck up a conversation, from that. And he was talking about how he was transitioning his farm to organic. My recollection, we didn't talk anything about renting a place for a while after that, but I had said that I would love to come see the place because he was telling me where it was. And growing up in Jo Daviess County, I kind of thought I knew everywhere in Jo Daviess County, but he was telling me he was on Irwin Road, and I was like, where the heck is that? So finally got the opportunity to, go down there later on. But, this all is kind of part of us being participants in the Jo Daviess County Soil and Water Health Coalition, which is just a small, I think we got about 30 active members in the county of just farmers that have different ideas. We try to host a couple field days every year at different farms, just learning from each other, sharing things that are working, things that aren't, and just being able to plug in and kind of have a shared community with that. But Harry, if you wanted to add, I guess I've actually never asked you why you came to that field day. So if you you wanted to kind of walk through that.
You're great. And thanks, Nathan. And I will say that all of you who are on this webinar, seminar, whatever you want to call it, have already taken that first step. You need to show up. And, we all have wants. And I always wanted to, do our more regenerative, sustainable, organic farming. But, I'm not a full-time farmer. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the experience. And so you just start pulling threads. And through one of the threads I pulled through, a son's work colleague introduced me to Will Glazik, who Nathan Aaberg highlighted in an earlier slide. And we hired Will Glazik just to advise us. It was just my 2 sons and I figuring out, okay, we're going to buy this stuff. What seeds are we going to do? What's our rotation going to be? And in the process of doing that, I'm getting myself out there. I showed up to this field day, just like you're showing up to this webinar. That the strongest force in nature to overcome is inertia, and every journey begins with the first step. And so I went to that field day at the Keisters farm, and fortune prepares those who are. What do they say? Fortune comes to those who are prepared. And I showed up, and by golly, I met Nathan, and we struck up a conversation. And it was clear from the start that we shared a similar philosophy, and he and his family had needs, and I and my family had needs, and we realized that some of the needs they had we could fulfill, and some of the needs that I had they could fulfill, and it went from there.
Yes, and then a little bit about which I know Harry's kind of alluded to. If I can advance, there we go. Talked a little bit about this, but as for like where the place is, so we sit in what's called the Driftless region. Jo Daviess County is the only full county that's still within that comes down from the Mississippi River from starting in southern Minnesota, but kind of a unique unglaciated topography. So we have a lot of steep hills. It's absolutely beautiful. There's not really a much better place to sit and watch the sunset than right here. And we can see over to Bellevue, Iowa, from the place, and it's just really cool. But Harry, if you wanted to give a little more stats on the farm and anything else you want to add on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned the Chatter Farm is 565 acres, about 100, actually 175 of it is tillable, but it's the rest of it is pasture and timber, and we're in not a our not a particularly amazing ag country, but you have to I think you have to work with what you have, and talking to knowledgeable people like Nathan and Will Glazik. We have rolling hills. They're good for pasturing. They're good for grazing, and they're good for haying, and they're good for small grains. We have small fields, so you need smaller equipment to work them. And we were just working with what we had. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not a hobby, and this is not meant to be just a fun project in my semi-retirement. I want this farm to be economically self-sustaining, because if it's not, then everything we're doing is, just for show, and it has no staying power. But if we can do what we're doing with our land and have it make a reasonable or superior economic return with our farming practices, then that might serve to move the needle. So we invested very little in what we bought. We realized we had to get a grain bin just for if you're going to be organic, just the chain of command. That made it easier. We bought a roller crimper, and then we bought used auger, used gravity wagons. And I think in total, we invested about $65,000, which is not a small amount of money, but it's not like we were going out and buying a $250,000 tractor and anything like that. And the rest we were going to contract out. Today, somebody is planting soybeans for us. And at the end of the year, somebody will combine those for us. And in between, we do a lot of little stuff ourselves. But that's how we started out, with one step at a time.
Yes. So after Harry and I finally got to go to the farm. It was fall of 2020, and we got struck up that conversation and kind of led to the possibility of being able to rent it. It really started with a really formal arrangement. So I won't forget when I first got the email. I was like, oh my, I'd never signed a lease before for a farm, and I was like, this is long. It was like 13 pages, which I've come to really appreciate because it really laid out a lot of things. But what it started with, and I went ahead and decided to add that here, is kind of that shared value that Harry and I and his family have for the land, what we're trying to do with it. Another thing that we did the very first year was put a little over a mile of perimeter fencing in, which has made livestock integration through the cropping system over the years, and how that's evolved to really work more well than not having that. But that's kind of what we started with in July 2nd, 2021, which is when the farm officially became organic, is when I started leasing a part of it. Harry, you have anything you wanted to add on the beginning with that?
Super briefly, Nathan, I would just add that the purpose of the lease and having something in writing is to force you and me to communicate about stuff, eventualities that might arise, so that we can talk about them before they are issues. Because if you ever get to a point in time when you got to pull out the lease and say, you're supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do this, and you start bickering on it, it's a little late. So the whole idea is just to force clear communication.
Yes.
That's all I have to add.
No, good. So then a little bit on, what different things we've tried. So, obviously we're in a place where there's a lot of erodibility with, steep slopes, and, limiting that runoff. I say I want to infiltrate as much water as possible, and whatever does leave our farm, I want it to make sure that's water, and that's not carrying additional nutrients with, especially with the close proximity to the Mississippi River. It's a very 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 short ride down the stream to get there. So some of the things that we've done. Crimping cereal rye in the far right here. So that's the crimper that Harry was talking about, and we'll be doing that here on the next couple of days after the soybeans are planted. And so putting that armor on the soil, limiting that erosion. Here we're also drilling the cereal rye. This was fall of 2024. And then another thing that tried a little bit last year and doing more of this year is some alleyway corn. So planting 4 rows of corn and then skipping 10 feet to really try to eliminate erodibility and trying to target higher yields within that row. Just different things that we're trying out. A couple other things. So we've grazed. We have cattle right now that are grazing there. Sheep. Here, I just think it's a kind of a cool picture and a cool story of we were kind of setting up, what my grazing rotation was going to be. This was in 2023, and the one field it had some mustard, which is not a terrible plant, but the birds definitely didn't have that same opinion. So there is dozens of nests in this one 12-acre field right outside of the house there at the farm. And we decided, we're going to leave that and come to it later, so that way they can hatch and then fledge out. The sheep won't destroy that by any means, but just kind of allowing them a little more undisrupted time to be able to hatch out. So that was, one thing that was really cool. And then last year also did a trial with some strip tilling of corn. So just tilling about a 8-inch wide alley to be able to then plant the corn seed in. And that's something that I've just always been incredibly fortunate with Harry. And that communication is such an important piece of this is, like, why are we doing what we are doing? Sometimes I don't have the answer. But being able to experiment and just being able to talk that through, because there's our fields definitely don't look the same as the typical corn and soybean fields that you drive by all over the state of Illinois. But our primary rotation is rye, and then harvested for grain, and then we'll be grazing after that with underseeding of clover, and then we'll plant rye again to crimp for the soybeans, and then going to corn, and that's kind of the 3-year rotation that would be the most prominent on the farm. All
So,
right.
Nathan,
Oh, yes.
Nathan, you teed me up. I mean, but we have a lease, yes. I think we do. I'm not sure whether we've renewed it or not. I mean, but what we do is we talk about the rotation, which Nathan just briefly reviewed. What crops we're going to plant in what order and which fields they should go on. The fact that Nathan and his family have animals is huge for us in an organic system. We can use those animals to mow. We can use those animals to weed. We can use those animals to fertilize. And so rather than having fixed fields that are leased to Nathan, we look at the whole system. And this is what's so great about having the partnership that we have. We're very philosophically aligned. I benefit from Nathan's knowledge, his access to equipment on his family's farm to do some frost seeding or something like that, which if I were to do that would involve a lot of time and hassle. So there's just a lot of great mutual benefit. I mean, I feel like I'm benefited quite a bit. I'm really interested in supporting Nathan's desire to take creative risks and experimentation. And he mentioned about how he's doing some of the row cropping and things like that. All of this is designed to make the farm more productive and to, boost soil health and all that sort of stuff. So we just have to stay flexible, and we have to continue to communicate, which we do. And like this year, we bought a bunch of chicken litter. And, the question is, well, who should pay for the chicken litter? Who's benefiting from that? Well, you're using this field. Well, I'm using that field. Well, I'm going to be spreading it. And we just talk about that stuff. And it's pretty easy to figure out the right arrangement for that. But the most thing is if you got the right person, everything is fun and it's not a problem. And if you run into a problem, okay, you have a crop failure, you put the cows in there and let them eat it. And they can turn it into feed. So, I don't know. I feel incredibly fortunate to be with such a knowledgeable and easygoing, and experienced partner as Nathan. We're incredibly lucky.
and that goes both ways. So, I mean, what I guess is a good point, a good time to add this, that, I always think it's weird if I don't talk to Harry for a period of time. Like during the winter, there's not necessarily much to talk about, and it's kind of weird if I go a month and I haven't talked to him. But they come out, him and his wife Beth come out quite often, and it's always good to just be able to sit down and chat, or over a meal, or sitting out on the porch looking out over the valley there. So it's always. I've just come to learn that that's not necessarily normal. I think it should be more normal, but it's something that I feel just as fortunate to have that. So the next, sharing the story. So kind of giving, full circle. We got started with the county Water and Soil Health Coalition, and we've been able to continue. We've had a couple of different field days. We'll have another one here in August of just kind of sharing what it is that we're doing. We were able to do a field day in 2024 on the right there, in conjunction with Fishers and Farmers. They had their I actually don't know what it's called, but I'll say annual kind of conference thing in at Chestnut Ski Resort, which is only about 5 miles away. So we were able to host a field day before that and have a nice group of people from all over the Midwest.
Look at that.
Oh. That was Harry's feedback. That's when I was asked a question. So that's been a big piece, is being able to just share that, because sometimes people come out and then they give me an idea of, oh, well, have you tried this? And just kind of furthering that. And that's something that's really, really rewarding on my part. I'm the one that kind of ends up signing us up for those types of things. But it's just trying to maybe have that next experience where somebody that's looking for land, somebody that has it, they meet, and that would be really cool to be part of, kind of helping facilitate that, inadvertently, as part of hosting those field days. We've also had the opportunity the last 5 years to be able to do a lot of soil testing with a professor out of the up in Wisconsin, UW Platteville system, on how much, or we've actually found how little runoff we get from the different practices that we do, and be able to compare those and kind of track it over will be a half decade of what we're doing, and seeing what the results of that is. Harry, do you have anything to add on that one?
No, just that these field days are great. It's not preachy. It's peer to peer. It helps people that attend them take some of the fear and mystery out of it. And I think that's all helpful to other people on their journey towards thinking about how they could manage their land differently or better.
All right. And then, this one, and I never want to say anything poor of other farmers. I know everybody's trying their best, and that the farm economy is not the most vibrant as a whole right now. But these pictures were both taken on the same day, the day after we got, about an inch and a half of rain and a little over half hour. So there was a lot of erosion events that occurred. The field on the left at Harry's farm was planted down after corn to cereal rye that we planted. I think it was the 23rd of October last fall, and there wasn't ruts being cut. We kept the soil there, we kept all the nutrients there, and that's something that's really important and part of the land ethic and stewardship that we both share. And on the right, it was actually on my way to Harry's that I stopped, and this is a small stream, or I guess it's classified as a creek, that obviously had swelled up overnight. And what you see, there's some debris of wood, but it's actually a lot of corn stalks that ended up from neighboring farms into the ditch, which is just super unfortunate. We all want to do the best that we can, but different practices do have different outcomes, and that's just something that highlights, and something that Harry and I have spent many hours over the years talking about, in terms of how we want to be good stewards of the ground that we have there, and how we can do that and still be productive.
Ethan and Harry, we've got like 1 minute left.
I know. Last
well,
slide.
let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. I will just say that attitude is everything. Stay flexible, be open-minded, be kind, have fun. And I think it speaks for itself to show you how fortunate I am to have a partner as experienced and eloquent as Nathan.
And the only thing I was going to add is, as I had kind of stated earlier, around the communication. It's okay. I mean, a lot of people like landlord tenant, it's not necessarily this harmonious relationship, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I hope for everybody that's landowner that they're able to find someone that's willing to have those, that level of communication and openness about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that shared values, and that for people looking for farms that they're willing to, take that extra step of having those conversations on their end. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. And if we have time for questions, I'm wide open for anything you got.
Harry and Nathan, thank you so much. That was awesome. Any questions? I have a few questions, of course, but any questions from anybody else? I guess I'll just ask
There's
Nathan. Oh, there's one.
Yeah, there's one in the chat from Vince. Vince said, "How did you both settle on a lease rate? Often there are benchmarks for ag land in the region, but when you are building an agreement on values, those aren't always helpful."
Well, I'll take a stab at that first, Nathan,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to have to sign off. Obviously, we were leasing our farm before to another adjoining farmer, and we lease out my parents' farm, which is adjacent to our farm as well. So we had a pretty good idea of what lease rates were in the area, and then it was just a conversation with Nathan, and we came to an arrangement. It was pretty straightforward.
Vince, does that answer your question? Do you have any other follow-ups to that? Feel free to come off mute too.
Sure. Thanks for the answer and thanks for the sharing. I guess I'm just curious to know if in the conversation about the rate, you guys incorporated some of these intangible things, right? The element of stewardship, the element of like knowing that you're supporting someone in building their own enterprise, just whether those were parts of the conversation. And how maybe you've spoken to other landowners or other tenants as they embark on those discussions and try to put a value on more than just the check.
Yeah, that's a very, very fair question. It's really hard to anticipate what all those intangible things would be and to like incorporate them into a lease in writing, which is why it's so important to share a philosophical understanding with somebody. And you've heard the old saying, you only move as fast as the speed of trust. And, little by little, you gain that trust and you can move more and more quickly. But I think it's just, we each approach this with a sense of fairness and open communication. If Nathan feels like he's contributing more of these intangibles and begins to feel like he's, being used by me, I hope he feels comfortable bringing that up, and then we would address it. And likewise, if I feel like he's getting a deal that's too good, because we want this to be an economic arrangement that's sustainable and economically proper for him as well as for our entity, our farm. So it's a tough question. I mean, so much of it involves who you're working with, and I just got to say, I got really fortunate.
The one thing I'll add to that is time horizon. So pretty much your question, it's really tough if all you're looking for is like, what's my rent going to be this year? Whereas, I've said it numerous times to Harry and Beth of just, I hope I have the opportunity to farm here as long as I'm able. So when you have a longer range vision, I think that just makes those conversations that much easier of, like last year when we did corn, we tried 7 different things and we took the best 2, and that's what we're moving forward with this year. But it's because I had that opportunity to, take that risk, and some of them didn't work out. But it's because I knew that, I had that was going to be back here, not just next year, but hopefully for a very long time, to be able to try those things. And it's not extractive. It's about trying to build and compound on what we've done and continue to advance that forward. And I think that's something that's not as common as it needs to be in these types of arrangements.
Great. Nathan and Harry, thank you so much. Harry, thanks for dropping in while you were able to.
Wow, timing was perfect. I got to sign off. Thank you both very much. This is a minor miracle that it worked. Oh my God. We'll see. I'm on the edge of a cypress tupelo swamp in southern Illinois, which is gorgeous. Anyways, I'm going to go take a look at it now, and then we got to move on.
All right.
Good luck.
Thanks,
Thanks
Harry.
Bye-bye.
And then we should have a little more time at the end for any more questions for Nathan. Again, I have a few for him, but we're now going to transition to our next presenters. We have Karen Stetler and Robin Moore from the Land Stewardship Project. They're going to tell you more about that nonprofit that's based in Minnesota. I just want to say, in the time I've spent in the land access world, which has been 13 years, I've tapped their knowledge and wisdom so many times. I'm so surprised they still pick up the phone. They're just super knowledgeable. They've been immersed in working with farmers and landowners and succession planning and all those things. And they do it with a lot of creativity and a lot of dedication, a lot of humility. So they're going to talk about values and how you articulate your values and goals and how that can be helpful to you in talking with your farmer and your family. Why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I am going to try to share my screen here. And then get started. So yes, thank you so much for inviting Robin and I to be here. And I just want to say that values and goals is one of the topics that I feel is so important. And whenever I get a chance to talk about it, I'm just thrilled to be able to do that. So before we dive in with some activities and some tools, I just want to introduce myself briefly, offer Robin a chance to introduce herself, and then a little bit about our organization. So I'm Karen Stetler, and I live in Western Wisconsin. I am on our family farm. My dad and my husband and my two sons all live together here on the family farm. And I've worked with the Land Stewardship Project for about 27 years. I've worked with beginning farmers, retiring farmers, and landowners. And I'm honored by that opportunity to help people kind of think through land access and farm transition. And if I can help people make smooth decisions, that's one of the things that brings me a lot of joy. Robin, my esteemed colleague, could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Robin Moore. I live in Western Minnesota, and I've worked with landowners for about 12 years now. I just echo everything that Karen says. I know how hard it is to talk to renters. I know how hard it is to talk with landowners if you're a farmer. I know how hard it is to talk with family when you haven't, especially when you just don't have a practice for talking. And that's one of the things I love to help people with as well. So I'm grateful to be able to do that here.
And so for those of you who are not, thank you, Robin. For those of you who are not familiar with the Land Stewardship Project, we are a 44-year-old nonprofit membership organization operating in Minnesota. That's where our offices are. But that being said, we do work with folks who live outside of Minnesota. So we invite you for wherever you are to participate in our programs and policy work. One of the reasons that I love to work at the Land Stewardship Project is because we are a values-based organization. And you can see on the screen the values that we lift up and help use these values to decide the work that we do. And as you can see, some of the work involving beginning farmer training, farm transitions, land access, community-based food systems, soil health policy and organizing. So these really help to guide what we do. And both Robin and I work mostly with land access and farm transitions and focus on helping people make good decisions. Okay. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I am honored to introduce Bill and Bonnie McMillan. Bill says, as a landowner, you have the power to determine the legacy of your land. That decision is the most important decision you can make. You can see by that quote that Bill is a very thoughtful person, and he and Bonnie took the decision that they were making about their land very seriously. I want to talk about something that I'm sure you've all heard about before. I want you to think about a time that you have gone on a journey and you pack up your bags, you have your snacks in the car, you have your water bottle so that you stay awake, all the gear that you need, and you take off. And I didn't plan this with Nathan, but he showed you that map at the very beginning of this webinar. And if you don't have a map or a destination on your map, you could go anywhere. But you may not end up where you wanted to be. You may end up there, but you may not. So one of the things that I want you to think about as we talk about values and goals is that they can help you plot your destination. And they can help you better have a better chance of making it to where you want to end up. To start, I just want to take a moment and just kind of give ourselves a working definition of values. Values are our core principles and standards of worth. They act as an inner compass, guiding our beliefs, behaviors, decisions, and what we prioritize in life. And a goal is a desired result, aim, or objective that a person envisions, plans, and commits to achieve. And so to dive into a little bit more with Bill and Bonnie, they took determining their values and goals very seriously and spent a good amount of time really thinking that through at the beginning of their journey in their big decision, which was for them a farm transition. But you could also think about it as thinking about looking for a renter. They were very specific about wanting to find a family that would continue to do stewardship farming and earn a living on the farm. Not to be a hobby farm, but that was going to be an earned income for them. They had many opportunities. They had somebody knock on their door and offer them a 1031 exchange. Give me 8 days and we'll make this, top dollar sale. And, they could have walked away with a lot of money. They had a relative interested and they had neighbors interested. After looking at their goals and values, they made a decision. And what they didn't realize with that decision to sell to a neighbor was that it was going to create some community disruption. And another neighbor was deeply hurt that they weren't considered, and it created tension in the community. Because Bonnie and Bill had gone through an intensive goal and value process, they revisited what they had done, and they realized that they would have made the same decision all over again. And so that work that they had done with goal setting and values really primed them to be able to feel comfortable about a decision, even when it made a ripple in the community. So it's Robin's and my hope today that you engage with the resources that we will be sharing. Take a moment to think about what really motivates you, what you want to see as the future for your land, and to give you some tools to help you get there as smoothly as possible. So what will be happening on your land in 10, 15, 20 years in the future? What stewardship will be in place? Now, I am hoping that you have received in an email this handout called Setting Your Farmland Stewardship Values and Goals, which was based on a handout that a coworker of mine, Caroline Van Schaik, started, and then Nathan and Jeannie put some touches on. So we've created this for you to work with today. And what I would like for you to do is to read through, there are about 21 different statements. And also to let you know that if there's a statement that you have in your mind that isn't on here, there's room you can add it. But I'd like for you to check 8 of the farmland stewardship values and goals that really resonate with you. If you are able to turn off your camera and actually maybe this, because most cameras are off right now. I'm gonna try something new. So if people, when you're done, if you could turn your camera back on again, that will help me know when you're done. We'll have a maximum of 5 minutes, but if we don't need 5 minutes, we'll add some other content at the end. So any questions? Check 8 farmland stewardship values and goals that resonate with you.
Yeah, I also dropped this worksheet that Karen is referencing in the chat. So if you can't find it in your email, you can find it in the chat.
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate that this is a lot to move and read through and think through. I'm going to give you another minute and then bring everybody back. Okay, so thank you all for engaging. Sorry to keep moving through this on a quick pace. On a webinar, it's hard to get all the things in, I know. So for those of you who got to 8, wonderful, great. If you didn't, please make sure that you take time after the webinar to complete the 8. What I would like for you to do next is to take your top, oh, shoot, here we go. Oh dear, this is like crazy. I would like for you to find the top 2, star the top 2. Jeez, I'm sorry, my computer is being weird. I think it's maybe the operator error, but okay, so star your top 2. I'll give you just a minute to do that. And as you're completing your top 2, if you feel comfortable, feel free to share in the chat 1 or 2 of the stewardship values or goals that most resonate with you. And I'd love for you to just think through those top 2 and really define for yourself what you mean by those top 2 so that you can be able to share that with other people. I think that's really important, to be able to communicate well what you mean, because sometimes people will have different thoughts about what each of these statements might mean. So you're doing the first step right now. You're doing the work and you're doing your work. That's important. The second thing is to invite others on your decision-making team to do the same thing. So you want to do this separately so that you can each have your own opportunity to really think about what it is that you value, what your goals are, and then share. When you come together to share, I'm just going to highlight a couple things. I know you're going to have more detailed dive in communication later on, but I'm sure you've heard of all these things, but it does not hurt to lift them up. Active listening, seek understanding, summarize, and make sure that you have clarity. So these are techniques that you can use to work with and talk with other people in your decision-making on your decision-making team, and then together you can decide 1 or 2 top values that resonate for everybody. So I will just say I have a couple examples to sort of end with, and then I'm going to turn to Robin with tools. One, a family that went through this values work ended up deciding that they had the confidence to actually talk amongst so there was one person of the family that was going through the workshop, and she had the confidence to talk with the rest of her family about what her goals were, and delighted to find out that she was nervous about it. She didn't know what would happen, but everybody was on the same page, and they were able to then start making some plans to actualize that goal. And another farm family did the values work and realized that how the land was farmed was much more important than who farmed the land, which expanded their opportunities and thoughts beyond family in terms of next steps for that land. I will turn it over to Robin with some tools.
Helps to come off mute. So thank you, Karen. And like we've said before, the values that you're articulating for yourself will make any conversation you have, whether it's with a family, whether it's with a renter, whether it's somebody that you're thinking about selling your farm to. Knowing these things will make any of those conversations go better. And if you understand your goals and needs, the next step, as Karen said, is asking others, sharing your goals, and then asking others what their values and goals are, and looking for alignment. And if you don't find alignment, then working on compromise. And that's really easy to say and really hard to do, especially when there's not a pattern of communication between people about these kinds of things. And so what I am bringing to you today are a couple of references that give some good tips and some good reminders about how to approach those conversations that are going to be, that you anticipate might be challenging or hard. And the other thing that this helps you do is come back. Like, because when people get scared, when people get offended, when people get confused, when there's misunderstandings, sometimes the conversation doesn't continue. And there are going to be those things. There's no doubt. And so this is really about how can you prepare the best situation to enter those conversations, and how can you find way paths to come back to those conversations. So I have two things. I haven't developed a resource specifically for talking with family, but both of these things address a lot of what we're talking about. You're going to go deeper into this later, but these are some pieces to help. And mostly they're stating things that are pretty obvious. But when you get stressed or worried, or things are going on, or you're processing yourself, you can't always do the things that make the most sense in the time. And it helps to have them written down and to think about them deliberately ahead of time. So on this first one, this is owner-renter discussion tips. And the things I really want to lift up here is meet in person if you can. And then start with asking, and this goes for any conversation, family or renter, meet in person if you can, and don't start with talking about yourself. Start with asking what the other people's values and goals are, and an invitation. Active listening, as Karen said, and if you don't know what that is, it's super easy to look up. We don't have the time to work on and practice that, but it's really just repeating. It's listening carefully and then repeating back what you hear and looking for clarification. And start by saying what's working. Start with what you appreciate, what you see that's good. Start with something positive and naming that you see it. So it doesn't just start with an ask or a conflict. There's a lot of other things on that sheet that are helpful. At the very bottom, I developed this for landowners and farmers working on soil building practices. And I have some, at the bottom of this page, there are some words to use and words to think twice about that might, especially if someone is wary of change or wary of something being too, air quote, progressive. These are some ways to think about approaching that conversation. Karen, can you switch slides for me? So the next one I have is actually one that I think is a lot less, has a lot less traction with people because it's not clear when or how they would use it, but I actually think it's the most valuable. And this is about thinking about facilitation for a really hard conversation. So I have done this in my job many times. For example, there was a landowner and a prospective land seeker. The landowner was in their late 80s, the land seeker was in their 30s, and they were a perfect match. The landowner had been farming this land for 40 or 50 years and been doing intensive managed grazing in a hilly landscape, and was deeply Christian and a pastor, and the had a house directly adjacent to the farm and was excited about a neighbor as well. Same thing, everything lined up with this beginning farmer, deeply Christian, doing managed rotational grazing, had a family and was excited for, surrogate grandparents. Like, they were perfect for each other in every way. And there were generational confusions, and there were one was from central Minnesota, the other one was from the East Coast. There were communication differences, and they immediately were having miscommunications and getting deeply emotional and ready to walk away from everything. And I came in and facilitated, and I want to be super clear about what facilitation is. I did not give them advice. I did not have an attachment to a specific outcome. I did not help them in decision making. I did not take sides, and I did not help them with conflict. What I did was basically make sure that everybody had a chance to speak, that everybody had a chance to understand and check in on the understanding, and that we got to the bottom of what was happening in some of those spaces. And it took several meetings. The farm owners had not done their values work. And so a lot of that time that we spent was recognizing, hey, we actually don't have clarity on your values. And as a couple, you don't have clarity between each other. Let's take a break. Let's come back. Let's stop this, because we're not going to get anywhere right now. Let's stop this and come back. And it made it so there became understanding that this farm actually wouldn't support the venture that the young person was interested in doing. And because of that shared understanding and talking through these things, the retiring farmer was able to help with neighbors to find something that actually was more appropriate. And they worked together to figure out the appropriate plan for this farm. And so it's not always happily ever after, but they were all ready to walk away from that conversation and never talk to each other again. And facilitation helped it so they could come back. And it doesn't have to be a professional. That's why I made this sheet, is it does not have to be a professional person. There are things that you can do with somebody else, or even if you don't have a facilitator, things that can help. And those, I'm just going to run through some of those things real quick. I have healthy steps and pointers. So if you do bring somebody in that has no skin in the game, no benefit or no attachment to an outcome either. I have on this sheet that I shared some examples of professionals that also help with this. But starting with agreements of conduct, like, we agree to not interrupt each other. We agree to disagree. We don't have to, or not have conclusion, like not have closure at the end of something. We agree to, I don't know, there's lots of things you can agree on, and I can share some general agreements, but those kinds of things give the facilitator or anybody the ability to say, hey, we said we wouldn't interrupt each other. Or, hey, we said that we give some people time to fully answer if they need more time. And that helps any of those conversations go better. Setting a time limit is really important, because we can wear ourselves out running into a wall. And sometimes you just need a stop and a break. So having an agreement on a time limit and why. Having agreements on what you're trying to do in that meeting. You're probably not going to figure it all out in one conversation. So set steps. Like, today we're going to figure out how long of a lease we want to do, or today we're going to figure out what our shared values are and how we can make some decisions on something we both agree on, and maybe not making all the decisions. It's important to regularly check in and make sure everybody is hearing and understanding the same things. Just because you said it doesn't mean that somebody heard it. And so just going around and saying like, hey, what does everybody understand about this right now? And that has uncovered some amazing like discrepancies and easy fixes that could just have hung up a conversation. It's important to take breaks. Doesn't matter what the conversation is about, it's important to take breaks. Make sure that every person is treated as an individual. So many times in farm conversations, we come as couples. And sometimes the partners have different opinions or different understandings or different assumptions, and they come out in some of these places. And it's important to not let one person speak for a couple, even if they are aligned. It's key to finding some problems. I have seen a situation where someone was speaking actually for their mother. It was a mother that was the other person, and the mother was used to letting her son speak for her. And it came down to the point where they were signing something, and the mother said, "I'm not ready to leave," and nobody had really asked her. So like it's important to check in with every person along the way. Make sure you do end on time. Oops, I skipped one. Check in on emotions as well, because anytime you're talking about land or farming or money, emotions are going to be part of it. And there's probably a power dynamic that is happening. As a landowner, you have more power. And that is always just going to be true. It is also, you have more responsibility on some levels, but checking in with emotions and seeing if people need a break, because if they do, then they can come back and talk more clearly. Make sure usually there's things that everybody agrees to do. It's great to recap that at the end. Make sure everybody knows what the next steps are, and then schedule the next time or agree upon a next time to meet. That's a lot. And the thing that I really want to emphasize, couldn't get that out. The thing I really want to emphasize is that we are here to help. Like, I hear that Nathan and Jean are here to help, and also Karen and I are here to help. Most of our work is helping individuals figure out what's appropriate for their situation. There are very little blanket resources or blanket answers, but we have a good deck of cards to work from, and we can probably find some that'll match your suit. So Karen, the next slide. These are just some pictures of farmers that we've worked with, and especially in transition, and they are all still farming. Just to make sure this is over probably about 10 years. The great dairy farm that we've helped with. And here are just some general resources. We have a farm transitions planning course, and if you own land, at some point, you're not going to be there to own it. And so a thing that we really work hard on is good farm transition planning. And that can look a lot of ways. It can be within a family. It can be external of a family. I just worked with somebody whose father died and owned farmland, and they assumed that they would just inherit the farm and they would split it, and do it the trust. And part of the father's will was, I expect you to sell this land upon my death because you don't live here, and this farm needs to be stewarded by people that live here. And that was part of his planning, and it sent them on a different direction than they anticipated, and I helped with that too. And it was really thoughtful, and it meant a lot to the farmer that was there. That was renting that farm, and it didn't get sold out from under him. He couldn't afford it still, but we worked with local landowners and we figured it all out. We have a farmland clearinghouse, which is it's like the Illinois FarmLink. It's just for Minnesota. And if you're working on casting a broader net, like if you're looking for people farther afield, you can always post there. And then we do have some web resources, and Karen and I are your best resource if you need to think through something after Nathan and Jean, because they're in Illinois. And that's all I got.
You're on mute, Nathan.
Karen and Robin, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Can you both put your emails into the chat so that people can easily reach out to you if necessary? And then while you're doing that, before we get into questions, we actually have a few polling questions to ask people just to sort of help us understand if this has all been helpful to you. And then we definitely want to come back to questions for Karen, Robin, Nathan, and whoever else you'd like to ask questions of. So, Jeannie, are you ready with a few polling questions?
Yep.
So,
Everybody should have those
yeah,
now.
Jeannie, do you want to explain it?
Sure. Just you'll see like certain questions are for if you're a farmland owner, and other questions are for if you're a service provider. So if you could just answer these super quick, and then we can get on to Q&A. But this is really helpful for us to continue receiving funding for our program.
So they just need to kind of go through it.
Yeah, it should just be on your screen, and you should just be able to easily select the answer.
Thank you, everyone. We're so grateful that you're doing this. If we could even get like 10 responses, we'd be ecstatic. Yeah, so while you're doing that's awesome. I'm going to also throw it out right now. Does anyone have any questions for Nathan, Robin, or Karen while people are doing the polling? We'd love to give you a chance to get some more information. It's just what you're looking for. Do we have something? Someone's on a mobile device and can't see the poll for some reason. All right.
Yeah, Mariah, I see that. I'm guessing it might just be a function that can only be on a computer. So it's okay. We can send you the questions after.
All right. Can we get to 10? We're at 9. Oh, we got to 11. All right. Excellent. Fantastic. I actually have a question for Nathan. The lease that you have now, I think you mentioned that was a crop share lease. Is that correct, Nathan? So
Yes.
you originally had a cash rent, which I think everyone understands. But can you explain just briefly what a crop share, how that works?
Well, it's a share of the crop. I'll just change words. No, so, site was optioned by Harry's family, and that's what the certificate is under. And so everything would get sold under that certificate. So then it's just net of expenses. Then what share would go to each party. So, and that depends a little bit on each crop. Is kind of how we've determined to best work that. So it's like corn takes a lot more labor hours versus the rye, for example.
So you're essentially agreeing like how much expense to share and how much of the actual crop to share.
Yep, exactly.
Got it. Fantastic. Any other questions? Anybody? Let's see here. Actually, here's a small question for you, Robin and Karen. So if someone has these values, what do you recommend them doing with it? Should they post it on the refrigerator? Like, what's a good way of like keeping that live for them?
That's a really good question. When we're working with folks through our courses, we ask them to actually write a statement and have a statement. And I have known people who actually do put it up on the refrigerator. So that is a real thing. I think sometimes, when people are doing their planning, just having that right at the very beginning of all of your planning sessions, just kind of read through it again, ground yourself, in that value would be really helpful, just to kind of make sure everybody's aligned and thinking that way, and then look at making the decisions that you need to make. the plans you need to make with that lens.
We also have people practice telling somebody else in 2 minutes or less. Like just like practice saying it out loud in a concise manner that doesn't take you all over every corner of the farm while you're talking.
Really good. 2 minutes. We've worked on self intros in 2 minutes too. That's a really valuable skill. It's a really valuable skill. I'm gonna, unless there's a question, Nathan, let's see. Yes, good. We have a nice comment. Nathan, you used the word crimping and drilling seed. Can you just say a little bit more about what those mean?
Yep. So that thing that was on the front of the tractor, so that is a chevron style crimper, which is a fancy way of the angles on it. So it's got these sharpened metal flanges that come out, and what that's meant to do is when the rye reaches enthesis, or when you start seeing pollen fly off, that we will plant the soybeans, which again is happening today, and then this weekend we will go out and we will crimp that. And the idea is that it breaks that in enough places that it can't stand back up, so that way it's the living mulch. As for drilling, that's just the planting of whether that's the rye or the soybeans. We call it a planter for corn. So, but we use a drill. So that, and that has no-till coulters on the front, so that way it can get through like that rye residue and be able to place the soybean seed, approximately inch or so under the soil.
In other words, if you didn't have the drill, you couldn't get through the vegetation that's sitting on the ground, correct?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? We're happy to have it. If anyone wants to share just very briefly what situation you have or what your hopes are, we'd love to hear that too.
I have a question, and again, I mean, just we're looking at transitioning from a more conventional farming to farming that reduces the chemical use that we are, but we have a lot of acres, and it's not something that we are able to do. We need to do it in small sections at a time, but so maybe how do we find help in planning that? Because even looking at the 1,000 acres that we have, which acres might be best to start at, identifying this area would be a good focus point, because we can't do everything because we need the financial income that the current farming brings us. And I don't think our current farmer would really, be able to transition with us. So we have kind of identified a few different farmers that we are looking at partnering in, but there's so many different components. And so I guess I'm asking, what do you think is the best place to start? And that might be a, more personal question, not for this group. So
Sure. No, I was just wondering, Nathan, do you have any general advice?
If I could ask, so is this row crop corn bean?
it's row crops.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, trying to find ways to reduce that or implement cover crops, whatever that looks like of what your values are, it sounds like you've already got a really good start. You're starting to have those conversations. It sounds like you've already kind of identified that the current tenant that might not be something that fits their goals, and that you've found some others. But something that was said at the very beginning of this that is so important to always remember is it's your land. So when you're having those conversations, I've heard a million excuses from other landlords when they're talking to potential or current tenants on changing things that we can't do that here. There's plenty of resources now in the state of Illinois that you can you can do all of these things. So and laying that out of what those goals are, and maybe it's something that on depending on what kind of setup or disease pressures or pests that you have, that maybe it's going into soybeans that it's easier to kind of start that. So doing it on a soybean year for some of those acres. But I think it is smart if it's feasible to start with those smaller chunks. So whether that's running it to one person and then saying, okay, over 5 years, we want to see us all transition with these goals. So we'll work on this section and then move around. But if it was if cover crops were something of interest as a way to address weed pressure, rye after corn going into soybeans is kind of the most proven thing as a beginner to be able to do that at a low cost and getting those kind of outcomes. So without more context, that's kind of like just generally how I think you're on the right track. And it's just a matter of getting a little bit more detailed in those conversations of what you want and what they're willing and able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just add, if you wanted to reach out to me, I could help you connect with some people that might have connections where you are and might also have good advice about how to like spin off certain component fields to other farmers and kind of see which ones do well for you. And we'd be happy to kind of just talk that through, because it is complicated both in the farming part, the farmland, but also on the relational issues, and then finding who's the best right farmer for you.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. I will contact
Sure.
you.
Look forward to talking to you.
Thank you.
All right, we are almost at 1:10. People are still here, which is awesome. I hope this has been super helpful to everyone. Jeannie, thank you for spinning the dials. Karen, Robin, Nathan, thank you so much for being part of this and for your prep. I know you all prepared a lot for this. We're so grateful for that. And we're so glad that each of you is trying to do what you can with your farmland. Again, I hope you'll remember that chart of the swamp of despair and things getting better at some point. It's worth the effort. And if any of us on this call can help you, you just got to reach out and help us know that we can help. We'd love to help. And with that, I think we're going to end it. Have a great day.